mention her name. Do I have her blushing? I read her pieces and I was like, oh my God. Oh. So if you see me jumping, flipping or anything, just catch me. Dr. Afua Cooper is a senior academic trained in the history of black people in Canada and the African diaspora. Her indomitable research on slavery, abolition, freedom, black education and women and youth studies has made her one of the leading figures in African Canadian studies. She currently teaches in the history, sociology and social anthropology departments at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. Her book on Canadian slavery, The Hanging of Angelique, The Untold Story of Slavery in Canada, and the Burning of Old Montreal, broke new ground in the study of Canadian and Atlantic slavery. Angelique was nominated for a Governor General's Award and was named by the CBC as one of the best books published in Canada. Her co-authored publication, We're Rooted Here and They Can't Pull Us Up, Essays in African Canadian Women's History, helped center the study of black women's history in Canada. Her commitment to social justice education has resulted in her curating 5 exhibits on black history, slavery, and freedom. Afua recently chaired the groundbreaking Dalhousie University panel on slavery and race, which investigated the university's entanglements with race, slavery, and anti-blackness, and the role of Canadian universities in slavery and the slave trade. She's also the lead author of that report. Our final speaker is none other than the lovely Dr. Afua Cooper.
Thank you, Denisha, for such a warm introduction. I will take lovely anytime. So, let's check in the time. Can I go, or is the volume? That's the volume is good? Yeah, okay. So I'd like to thank Dr. Annette Henry for the invitation. When Annette and I were talking about my participation and my contribution, finally we agreed, or maybe she did, that she wanted me to do poetry, which is always a treat and always a pleasure. And I also like to thank her team of supporters and students, Denisha, Yuya, Denisha's children, and everybody else who made this happen. And I'd also like to thank my co-presenters today. We've had a wonderful day. We've learned from each other. I thought what I wanted to do in terms of poetry is because I've been a poet all my life, and I work particularly in the genre of dub poetry, and I have a PhD in history, and I also teach, as you know, and research and publish, and I thought how to bring these two worlds of mine together. And I've always been like a poet at demonstrations, at marches, as a young person, anti-apartheid rallies. So we always felt that we use our service, we use our poetry in the service of the cause, in the service of Black liberation, and so forth. And then later on, a bunch of us formed the Dub Poets Collective, and we had, over the course of maybe 10 years, we've had like several international poetry festivals. We've come here to Vancouver, we've done poetry with Kayvon Cameron, Scruffmouth, I'm sure all of you know him. And so poetry has just been there all the time in my life. There are certain themes that won't leave me, and these themes are my family. I think that's the main reason I write poetry. Family, history, slavery, just being in this world, bringing the inner and the outer worlds together. It's Black humanity, and this morning I talked about how, I didn't say these words, but that's what I was saying, how we are cast, as Black people, we are cast out of humanity. And actually, as African people, we're cast out of humanity then during the 400 years of slavery and the slave trade, and today we still are cast out of humanity. And I now live and work in Halifax at Dalhousie University, and just a week ago we had a situation where a young Black woman, 23 years old, was beaten up in Walmart by the police. She was accused, her name is Santina Rao, and she was accused of stealing from Walmart. She wasn't, and they called the police, and when the police came, some of you I'm sure saw it on Facebook and on other social media platforms. Two cops just took her down, flung her down in the corridor and started punching her. She suffered a concussion, she broke her wrist. Her baby was in the stroller, her toddler was standing close by. And one is saying, well, what did they think had she been a white woman? I don't, this wouldn't have happened. Even they suspected she was stealing, they would have been gentle with her. When she showed them her receipt, she said, look, I've paid for everything, here's my receipt. Nothing. It didn't sway them. So for Walmart to call the cops on a young woman, you see, as Black women, we're not afforded the feminine protection, right? So she could just be beaten up in Walmart in front of her two children, and both she and the kids are traumatized. So in 2020, you wonder, that's what I'm saying, we have been cast out of humanity. And so you have institutions at university, the police, the banks. Yesterday, Funky and I were watching some videos in the UBC studios, because we had gone to do some filming, and we sit there in the living room, all the waiting area, and we are watching these videos, and we are like, there are no Black people in these videos. Whether it's a graduation video or a video promoting UBC, and we sat there for maybe half hour looking. There's no Black people at UBC in 2020 in these promotional videos. So it's deliberate, because we know there are Black people at UBC. And I was saying, they could even have gone to Annette and do a little clip on her and her research, because they did that with a white woman. They said, oh, Professor so-and-so, she's doing this groundbreaking research. And I'm saying, well, they could have gone to Annette, and done that and put her on the video. And then I heard Funky said, look, there's one! There's a Black man, and I don't know what he was doing, but it was like global studies, right? It was global studies. So. And then they said, oh! I said, oh, there's a girl. She looks mixed, she looks biracial. Okay, she counts. But for about half hour, I found only 2 people in these promotional videos. So who are we? Who are Black people that we can be beaten up at will in broad daylight? That happened in 1919, that happened in 2019. So there's this thing, the more things change, the more they remain the same. And that's why I want people to analyze power, because power is critical. It is a question of power, as Betsy Head, the South African novelist, wrote. And Betsy Head would play no shit. Like when she was at a writers' conference with a writer's conference, and she shared a room with this other writer, a white woman, and the woman was talking shit. And Bessie had just took the woman's typewriter, went on the balcony and threw it down. But her book, A Question of Power, is a book that everybody should read because it analyzes the power structure. Because oftentimes we're so much in our little silos about, oh, this is happening to me, and this is happening to you, and this is my group, and this is your group, and it's fine. We need to do those things, we need those analyses, we need to have those practices. But where is the big analysis? How do all these things fit together? And when we do the big analysis and start examining power, then I'm going to throw capitalism, then we'll see how things tie together. Then we will understand that in the Western psyche, black people are not really there as fully human. Because when the various emancipations occurred, so, today you're a slave, tomorrow you're free, but there was no psychological intervention with respect to white people, even black people too. But the people who held the power reinscribed the new social order to benefit themselves. So 100 years after emancipation in the British world, Muslim black people got the vote, 100 years after, right? So that tells you something. So a new social order was built on the vestiges of the last one. So my poetry investigates all of these things. I try to, and the presentation today, I'm calling it Those Who Left Without Saying Goodbye. And I have a little description. It's a mytho-archaeological literary journey that uses poetry and storytelling to narrate a story of one woman's engagement with the Middle Passage and slavery that ripped millions of Africans from their mother's bosom to the killing fields of the Americas, where we are now. This workshop, it's not a workshop, but it will be, uses poetry, music, prose, videos, audio recording, newspaper ads, which I have, and interviews to excavate a buried story. Those Who Left Without Saying Goodbye is a template that can be used by anyone wishing to engage in artistic memory, excavation, and emerge fully embodied and empowered. Because we're still not done with this story. We're not done with this story of slavery, even as we have, last year, 2019 was a year of return. I don't know how 1 year can be the year of return, but anyway, maybe it's the beginning of the years of return.
Yes.
And I also like to say, and this is another way I see how black people have been robbed out of the Canadian imaginary when we acknowledge. It's interesting that, Funk is the cartoon that she used, and I pointed out to Barrington. It's from 1970. It's from Contrast newspaper in 1970. So what, how many years is that? 50? 50 years ago, Contrast, half a century. Contrast is saying, look, they're streamlining our kids. They have the school to prison pipeline. 1970, right? And today we're still saying the same thing, half a century later. So, I'm kind of like in the Bob Marley mode right now.
Yes.
It's gonna have to take a revolution to bring forth a solution.
Yes.
Lightning and thunder, brimstone and fire. So, we must also acknowledge the solution that we have ain't working, people. We must also acknowledge Africa, the birthplace of humanity. In many ways, it was because of Africa why we're here right now. Millions of her daughters and sons were ripped away from her bosom, kidnapped, and stolen into what became known as the Great Maafa, the Great Slaughtering, in other words, the Atlantic slave trade. The slave trade debased Africa and robbed her of her greatest wealth, her people. Though Africa has been debased in so many ways, here in this gathering, she ascends. My poems are in honor of her ascension. So, the first poem is called Peggy. Is that what it's called? It's called Elizabeth Russell Speaks of Her Slave Peggy. And Elizabeth Russell was a slave-owning woman in Toronto. She and her brother, Peter Russell, who was administrator of the province, had this family of enslaved people: Peggy, her 3 children, Millie, Amy, Jupiter, and Millie, Amy, and Jupiter, yes. And she was married to a free black man named Pompadour. And Elizabeth Russell kept a diary, and she would write in her diary, people writing their diary. And Peggy and her children appears. So this meditation, a lot of it is taken from Elizabeth Russell's diary. I've put it in poetic form. And at the end of it, Peter Russell put an ad in the newspaper for the sale of Peggy. So this ad just shatters, the Canadian niceness, goodness, and politeness, as Fanny will love to say, which says that there was no slavery here. If you could just bring up the ad and then I'll read it. Thank you. So some of you may be able to see it. We'll come at the end of. I have to talk on the mic. So Peggy is in the habit of running away. Of course, that's one of the things slave people did. And Peggy is in the habit of running away. It would be bad enough if she left by herself, but now she's taking her children with her. She is a very bad woman, a mean slave. She goes to the outskirts of the city and roams in the bushes, eating berries and wading in the Don River, catching salmon that still travel to these parts. She has erected a hut of sorts from the brambles of the elderberry tree. She lived there with her daughters Amy and Millie for 3 weeks until Peter sent the constables to retrieve her. He returned the children to the house but lodged Peggy in jail. Now he wants to sell her, but neither Joseph Brandt nor Matthew Elliott wants to buy her, though they had promised Peter they would. It is on account of her fugitive career. Because no one wants to buy her, Peter has to keep her in jail. He resents paying the jailer's fee. Oh, if only that mean slave would behave. Her so-called husband, Pompey, visits her each day. He takes her food and a blanket. He brings her ginger tea. He claims that even though it is summer, it is still cold in the jail. Once Pompey even snatched the children from the house to visit her. Pompey is a free man. Otherwise, we would have jailed him too. Peggy's incorrigible son, Jupiter, has followed in her fugitive steps. He has just run off. Someone saw him in the vicinity of the Don River around Patra Road, lurking about Mr. Long's farm. Peter has sent the constables after him. Peter really wishes to be rid of Peggy. I, for one, do not want her ever to set foot in this house again. I hate the very sight of her, since she smashed the fine china I crossed the sea with from Ireland. Because the jailer's fee is mounting, Peter is forced to put an ad in the newspaper. To be sold, a black woman named Peggy, aged about 40 years, and a black boy, her son, named Jupiter, aged about 15 years, both of them the property of the subscriber. The woman is a tolerable cook and washerwoman and perfectly understands making soap and candles. The boy is tall and strong for his age and has been employed in the country business, but brought up principally as a house servant. They are each of them servants for life. The price for the woman is $150 and for the boy $200, payable in 3 years with interest from the day of sale and will be properly secured by bond, but 1/4 less will be taken in ready money. Peter Russell, York, February 10, 1806. Matthew Elliott has disappointed us. Joseph Brandt the same. Perhaps someone else will take pity on Peter and take the wretch on her son off his hands. I, for one, have already given my goddaughter, Elizabeth Denison, Millie, and Amy. That's the end of that one. And York, February 6, 1806. York is Toronto. It's the old name, or the first colonial name for Toronto. February 10, 1806. Peter Russell was a former administrator of the province. So just to let you know that people high and low owned and sold black people. I'd like I have the images for these two, only these two. One. And this image or this photograph, thank you, is of John Weir, the famous black cowboy, and his family, his wife, Mildred, and two children. At the time, they ended up having about 5 kids. And so, who is this John Weir? We know him as a black cowboy from Alberta. We know that he was born in South Carolina, and then after the Civil War, he left and went to Texas, and then to Montana, and he brought the Longhorn cattle over to Canada after. So we have these markers, these milestones of his biography. At the same time, I'm kind of wondering, who is he really? So I do what poets do. We create a story about John Weir. Well, it's, a lot of it is based on facts. But of course, I give him parents and grandparents and ancestors. And Weir, W-A-R-E, you'll see that many Ghanaians have that name, and it's not like an English name. It's like Ware. So I start thinking maybe the name survived in his family. If it is his father's name, who knows? And then in Ghana you also have this name Oware, or Ware, Oware. So I linked John Weir to that genealogy. So here's a poem. We'll just keep the image, where you can think of. Thank you. John Weir. They tell us you brought the Longhorn cattle all the way from Montana to these parts. You rode for 1,000 miles. You fled South Carolina to Texas after slavery ended. Though blacks were now free, they still had little liberty. White men who were defeated in the war could not abide living with emancipated blacks, instituted racial terror, bloodbaths and lynchings. In Texas, you became a cowboy, working cattle, breaking horses, wrestling steer, answering the call of your totem, cattle and horse. Some say you were born in a saddle. Your mama gave birth to you while escaping slavery on a horse, but they caught her. They say you got the spirit of the horse from her. The story is told that before slavery, she was a royal horsewoman from Oyo. Others say it was your father's father, a cattle herder from the African savannah, from whom you received your cow wisdom. They said he traveled for aeons with his herd until he came to the forest kingdom of Osai Tutu. It was there he took the name Oware. You speak the language of horse and cattle. You can tame any bronco. You calm any wild bull. John Weir, cowboy magician, part of the brotherhood of black cowboys who have been erased from the history of the West. Alberta beckoned. A white man named Stimson wanted you to take 1,000 heads of longhorn to Canada, to a territory called the Northwest, still owned by the Hudson's Bay. Canada was a monarchy, not a republic like the one you lived in. 1,000 longhorn from Montana to Alberta. You followed the North Star. John Weir, John Waré, John O'Waré, son of the House of Asante. If not for the slave trade, silk and kente would have draped your body. The king would send you on diplomatic missions to Oyo, to Salaga, to Hausa, to Ganja, and Songhai. The symbol of your authority, a cocktail dipped in ochre. With your 1,000 longhorns, you crossed prairies, scrubland, silent with that settled sadness in your eyes, until you reached Brooks, Alberta, in a new territory that, like Oklahoma, was brutally taken from the natives. What is the difference between a monarchy and a republic, you ask yourself? You hated Calgary and went there only when you must. In Calgary, you had to step off the sidewalk whenever a white person approached. You could not darken the entrance of any hotel or boarding house. Calgary reinforced the shame of your skin, this badge of dishonor, the dishonor and shame you thought you had left behind in South Carolina and Texas. Only in the wide open prairies did you feel truly free, 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 free. John Weir. A man must marry. She came from the east, Whitby, Alberta, or maybe Pickering. She had a sensible name, Mildred. She lived with her parents in Calgary. You visited only twice before you proposed marriage. She had a good carriage and a quiet and sure smile. She accepted the offer. You wed. She went with you to your ranch in Brooks and lived with you among the horses and cattle. Your 3 children grew up riding horses and having cows and ponies for pets. Later, your 2 sons would go on to fight in the Great War. In the midst of the early morning, in the early mist of the mornings, you still dream of your mother being whipped, half naked, her screams waking you up. You hold Mildred close, then ease out of bed and walk to the children's room. Janet is lying in her crib, dreaming peacefully. The white man sought you out, magician cowboy, to break their wild horses and create superior cattle strains. The red men also visit you to break their horses. You swap advice in easy camaraderie, answering their questions. Did they think you found it honorable when they called you the black white man? Bucking broncos, you must go to Calgary to participate in cowboy frolic. No one can ride a bronco like you. No wild horse has ever thrown you. In Calgary, you show them how to tame feral horses, play with them, put cattle to sleep simply with the vibration of your voice. Your hard work helped to create the bacchanal that became the Calgary Stampede, yet your name is written out. Oh, 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 oh! The grief of losing Mildred. She died from pneumonia and typhoid. You cry with your motherless children. Who knew that loss could hurt so much? A white man comes to your door. He is rich and famous. He has a horse for you to break. The children tell you not to go. They hang on to your coat, but you owe the man a favor, and the money is good, and you have to support your motherless children. Today is your 55th birthday. Mildred would have baked you a cake. You go. For the first time in your adult life, a horse throws you, John Weir. Before you fall, you hold on to its reins, and in cruel fate, Your hold has the power because you are so strong, John, to pull the horse down on you. You look into its blood-filled eyes, feel the breath from its snorting nostrils. His weight is an everlasting mountain. He crushes you. You close your eyes and your spirit flies over prairie lands, rice fields and indigo vats, and an ocean as wide as the Atlantic, to the forest kingdom of Osai Tutu, Aqua Bay, Oware. Welcome, John Weir. They say your funeral was the biggest Calgary had ever seen. John Weir, John O'Weir, John O'Ware. In Calgary, the newspapers call you the greatest cowboy, horsebreaker, steer wrestler, shaman, magician, cowboy, John Weir. Thank you. Yeah, John, I should have said he was famous as a horsebreaker and a steer wrestler. Like they thought he had magical powers with the animals. This one is called Negro Cemeteries. Yeah. A man walks on his farm the morning after a thunderstorm. He sees broken headstones pushing through the earth. He rubs the mud off and sees inscriptions like hieroglyphics, reveal names, dates, ancestry, a cemetery in a field of corn. The local museum set is an old Negro cemetery, and all over, Negro cemeteries are surfacing, appearing in potato fields, appearing in wheat fields, appearing in fields of corn. Like Osiris, African skeletons rise from the earth in green resurrections. Skulls with rattling teeth recite litanies of ancient woes. Tongues spout where none existed before and speak in funerary language. Griots rise from their graves and recount the stories of their journeys. Hafiz tongues and cleave and recite the surahs of the dawn. Babalaos emerge from the storm and divine with them shell and them stone. Me say the drummers them a come, them a run, them a come. The drummer them a come, them a run, them a come. Them a play the talking drum, the bata drum, the long drum, the funde, the djembe, the kete, sending electric messages across this land. Toussaint Louverture rise from his dungeon tomb and prophesy blood and fire. And a woman named Dorinda sits on her tomb, a pipe curled between her teeth, smoke curling from her lips as she recites and recites and recites the stories of her many passages, the stories of her many transformations, and all over. In Rio, in Havana, in Toronto, in Vancouver, in Edmonton, in Montreal, in Halifax, in Kingston, in Kingstown. They say, give us strength. And we say, rise up. And they say, give us strength. And we say, rise up, fallen fighters. Rise up, fallen fighters. Rise up, fallen fighters. Rise up, 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 up. Rise up. That was inspired by a real poem, a real event or incident that took place in Priceville, Ontario, where these headstones started coming out of the earth. And it was a Negro cemetery, as it was called in the 19th century. There were no black people in Priceville. The black people had been chased out by the white people, but here what happened? People die and you have a cemetery. It's really interesting how, you know, Priceville is this all-white town and then you have a Negro cemetery. So But you know, the earth doesn't lie, right? And at the same time, it was happening too in New York State, in New York City, in the Wall Street district, when they found hundreds and hundreds of African skeletons as they were excavating and wanting to put up this high-rise, and all these skeletons kept coming up from the earth, which is interesting because Wall Street, the richest piece of real estate on the planet, maybe, and it used to be the place where the black people lived, in the swamps, right? Because no one wanted to live there. And so they chased the black people out, like Price said, but hey, they are the skeletons, can't lie. So one of the things, the Book of Negroes, which is that military register that General Guy Carleton created when several thousand loyalists were leaving New York City in 1783, bound for Nova Scotia. And so there are all these names that were recorded, because George Washington came down with his posse to get the slaves who had run off from the American side. And so Guy Carleton said, I'm going to make this register. Now, when you look at the register, it's really, really a fascinating document. Because, you know, they're Albert, tall Negro. And it gives what they think is the person's age. Or they say, Albert is a sawyer and a carpenter. Annette, Negro wench, is a good cook. Her bakeress like Peggy.
So true.
It's brilliant, really brilliant. It gives you his little biography. It was the part that touched my heart. And you can look at it, it's online. Guy Carleton's Book of Negroes is when they list the children or the infants. You know, some of them had no name. There's no name to. So I wrote this. It's not finished, but I thought I'd share it with you. And to think, you know, what's in the mind and the hearts of these people as they must once again, you know, travel on an ocean seeking freedom. Pregnant women, children, some of the children didn't even have parents, they were orphans. So this is how they would list some of the children. Guy Carleton's Book of Negroes. It would be like child of Afua, or child of, and they may give the age, like child of so-and-so, 6 months old. So I wrote down as many child as I could find. Child of Venus, child of Peggy, child of Wanton, child of Betsy, child of Stewart, child of Pierce, child of Jemima, child of Campbell, child of Affy, child of Cooper, child of Grace, child of Saunders, child of Dignall, child of Westcott, child of Cadamus, child of Holmes, child of Crutchley, child of Wheaton, child of Sarah, child of Francis, child of Jackson, child of Williams, child of Reddick, child of Goss, child of Hutchins, child of Murray, child of Patterson, child of Rachel, child of Taylor, child of Juba, child of Davids, child of Caesar, child of Dixon, child of Tides, oh, sweet child of mine. Thank you. Well, maybe I'll do a short one and a long one. Richard Pierpoint, revolutionary soldier. Richard Pierpoint, revolutionary soldier. Yeah, on the loyalist theme, Richard Pierpoint was a loyalist. Revolutionary soldier, revolutionary soldier, revolutionary soldier, revolution. Richard Pierpoint, revolutionary soldier, at age 77, is no longer in his vigor. Now his only wish is for the government to send him back to his native settlement. So he writes to the King's Governor this July 1821 letter. Your petitioner, Richard Pierpoint, now of the town of Niagara, a man of color, a native of Africa, and an inhabitant of Upper Canada since 1780, most humbly sheweth that your Excellency's petitioner is a native of Bandu in Futa, that at the age 16 I was made prisoner, sold as a slave, conveyed to America, bought by a British soldier, served the king during the War of Revolution in a corps called Butler's Rangers, and again during the War of Napoleon in a corps of color, raised right here on the frontier of Niagara. In exchange for my freedom, I fought your revolution and raised you new nations on both sides of the division. That your Excellency's petitioner is now old and without property, that he has much difficulty to exchange a livelihood for his labor, and that he has much difficulty to obtain a livelihood by his labor, so he wants desperately to return to the land of his mother. That if His Majesty's government be so graciously pleased to grant him some relief, you damn teeth, he wished it may be by sending him to England, and from thence to a settlement near the Gambia or Senegal region, from whence he could return to Futa, because you stole my life. You took me from my wife, caused my family strife, stuck in my heart a knife. You cast my people into slavery. You stole the wealth of my country. Now give me my reparation for my long overdue repatriation. I wish again to see the Senegal waters flow. I wish again to see the spotted buffalo. Gaze at the face of the children. Hold the hands of my brother men. My heart is breaking inside my chest. A prickly pain all through my flesh, a strangulation around my neck where the slave hunters tied the rope. I still hear the screams of my wife as if Toubab snuffed out her life. And me, them tie me with a rope and a chain and drag me to this valley of pain. And I survived the Middle Passage. I survived the years of enslavement. Then I escaped, became a loyalist, and fought on the side of your government. And now I want to go home to rest, Mr. Governor. So grant me this last request. Send me back to Futa. Send me back to Africa. Oh, revolutionary soldier, revolutionary soldier, revolutionary soldier, revolution. I said he was stolen from Africa and he was brought to America. He was stolen from Africa and he was brought to Upper Canada. Revolutionary soldier, revolutionary soldier, revolutionary soldier, revolution. Revolutionary potential. One poem. And it's about carnival. It's about music. It's about color. It's about many things. I was in Fort de France, Martinique during the carnival, and there were all these, you know what carnival is. Performing people on the street. And there were all these rara bands. Rara bands are bands originally from Haiti or from Benin, Republic of Benin. And they were in Martinique, rara bands from Haiti, from Guadeloupe, from Miami, from New York. Like, the world's gone mad, and I do what poets do, and what is this I hear? 1,000 drums playing, rat-a-tat, 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 tat, tat, and Max Roach conducting, rat-a-tam-tam, rat-a-tam-tam, trap drums, djembes and congos, and the voices of 100 archangels chanting into the wind. Ra-ra. The drums scream the names of Dahomey. But this is Martinique. Dahomey is on the other side of the ocean. What is this I hear? Ra-ra drums awaken in the city. A dog howls. I look through the window. He dives into the sea and disappears while swimming to the other side of the ocean. A cock, its circadian clock, recalibrated, crows at 15 minutes to midday. Ra-ra rhythms have remade the world. But this is not Haiti. How come these Ra-ra people are marching all over Fort de France, sending vibrations into the earth, the sky, the air, answering secret rhythms with sacred rhythms? I am sure they are not mortal beings, but a celestial horde on the march with Babatunde Olatunje, master drummer. The sound of trap drums, sa-sa-yay, sa-sa-yaying up to the hills, way up to the Balata Road, past Tivoli, to the volcano named Montpellier. And from the peak of the hill, the drummers and the trumpeters look down onto the harbor, look way past the horizon, and beat their thoughts into the air, sending back the colonizer and Indian killer Desnambuc to the deepest dungeon of France, recrowning Carib chief Chatoyer, beating the martial rhythms for triumphant Carib warriors, reversing the slave trade, stitching whole again Africa. And in the distance, from the direction of Lamantin, I hear the pounding of hooves. Doom, 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 doom. The earth trembles in unexpected bliss. I see clouds of brown dust spiraling into the sky. I feel the hot breath of panting steeds rushing toward Fort de France. Somewhere there is a clash of cymbals. A gate opens. Mounted men holding a landscape of Osafa flags rush through. Sparks of fire rise from the horses' hooves. What is this? The cavalry, led by the fugitive slave named Mathieu Leveillé? From the savannah, the drummers advance, beating on 1,000 drums, blowing on horns and trumpets, bamboo sticks, shak, 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 African captives chained at the bottom of slave ships, drowned in the shipwreck at Ascafar, and from the volcano at Montpellier, I hear them weeping, wailing, and gnashing their teeth, a fury of chains clanking, as the ship crashed onto the rocks and sank to the bottom of the sea. Somber ghosts stand on the beach, look across the ocean, take us back to Benin. Now they walk across the landscape at Diamond Rock, beating their chests and chanting a salt water dirge. Oh, Ra-ra from Dahomey, Ra-ra from Haiti, Ra-ra in Fort de France, Ra-ra blowing onto the Caribbean Sea, towards St. Lucie and La Dominique, way up to Les Îles des Vierges, and down to the tip of Venezuela, creating this archipelago of rhythms. And then a boy, 14 years old, pierces the air with the fury from his trumpet, and suddenly the cacique Buhichio stirs from his sleep, rubs his eyes, grabs his conch shell, and blows a message to Hatui over in Cuba, and in Haiti to Livier-Tur, Desalegnes, Christophe, Cécile, Fatima, and Huracan, the god of the wind, the god of the rain. Huracan, the god of hurricanes, blows his breath across the sea. Hurricane a come, unu better run, hurricane a come. Meanwhile, Anacaona, empress of the island of Hispaniola, stands on the tallest point of Haiti, and whirlwinds, 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 her final dance for independence. Rah, 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 to rah.